Hello everybody, welcome to our second week of spiritual practices for uncertain times. My name is Sarah and this week we're going to think about holy uncertainty. But before we do that, I would love to read a story. And it's a little bit of a long story, so do feel free to get comfortable. I'm going to read from Exodus chapter 16. So grab a cup of tea or coffee or whatever non-caffeinated variety you would prefer. And let's think a little bit about our passage. The whole Israelite community set out from Elim and came to the desert of Sin, which is between Elim and Sinai, on the 15th day of the second month after they had come out of Egypt. In the desert, the whole community grumbled against Moses and Aaron. The Israelites said to them, "If only we had died by the Lord's hand in Egypt. There we sat around pots of meat and ate all the food we wanted, but you have brought us out into this desert to starve the entire assembly to death." Then the Lord said to Moses, "I will rain down bread from heaven for you. The people are to go out each day and gather enough for that day. In this way I will test them and see whether they will follow my instructions. On the 6th day they are to prepare what they bring in, and that is to be twice as much as they gather on the other days." So Moses and Aaron said to all the Israelites, just straighten you up a little bit. Moses and Aaron said to all the Israelites, "In the evening you will know that it was the Lord who brought you out of Egypt. And in the morning you will see the glory of the Lord, because he has heard your grumbling against him. Who are we that you should grumble against us?" Moses also said, "You will know that it was the Lord when he gives you meat to eat in the evening, and all the bread you want in the morning, because he has heard your grumbling against him. Who are we? You are not grumbling against us, but against the Lord." Then Moses told Aaron, "Say to the entire Israelite community, 'Come before the Lord, for he has heard your grumbling.'" While Aaron was speaking to the whole Israelite community, they looked toward the desert, and there was the glory of the Lord appearing in the cloud. The Lord said to Moses, "I have heard the grumbling of the Israelites. Tell them, at twilight you will eat meat, and in the morning you will be filled with bread. Then you will know that I am the Lord your God." That evening quail came and covered the camp, and in the morning there was a layer of dew around the camp. When the dew was gone, thin flakes like frost on the ground appeared on the desert floor. When the Israelites saw it, they said to each other, "What is it?" For they did not know what it was. Moses said to them, "It is the bread that the Lord has given you to eat. This is what the Lord commanded. Everyone is to gather as much as they need. Take an omer for each person you have in your tent." The Israelites did what they were told. Some gathered much, some little. And when they did it, they measured it by the omer. The one who gathered little did not have too much, and the one who gathered little did not have too little. Everyone had gathered just as much as they needed. Then Moses said to them, "No one is to keep any of it until the morning." However, some of them paid no attention to Moses. They kept part of it until morning, but it was full of maggots and began to smell. So Moses was angry with them. Each morning everyone gathered as much as they needed, and when the sun grew hot, it melted away. On the 6th day they gathered twice as much, 2 omers for each person, and the leaders of the community came and reported this to Moses. He said to them, "This is what the Lord commanded. Tomorrow is to be a day of Sabbath rest, a holy Sabbath to the Lord. So bake what you want to bake and boil what you want to boil. Save whatever is left and keep till the morning." So they saved it till the morning, as Moses commanded, and it did not stink or get maggots. "Eat it today," Moses said, "because today is a Sabbath to the Lord. You will not find any of it on the ground today. 6 days you are to gather it, but on the 7th day, the Sabbath, there will not be any." Nevertheless, some people went out on the 7th day to gather it, but they found none. Then the Lord said to Moses, "How long will you refuse to keep my commands and my instructions? Bear in mind that the Lord has given you the Sabbath. That is why on the 6th day he gives you bread for 2 days. Everyone is to stay where they are on the 7th day. No one is to go out." So the people rested on the 7th day. The people of Israel called the bread manna. It was white like coriander seed and tasted like wafers made with honey. So we are considering again what it means to have spiritual practices in a time of uncertainty. And the book of Exodus, the second book of the Bible, is a lesson in humanity's response to uncertainty. I've just finished a week of my doctoral study. I'm studying in America with people from all over the world. I'm one of 2 Europeans of my cohort of 50, and it has been really, really interesting hearing the experiences of people from all over the world in relation to the pandemic. And I was reflecting on how strange it is, in a way, that we, for the first time in a long time in the global church, all are encountering the same challenge. Now, some of us are encountering it to greater degrees than others. I think one of my reflections on this week is that it made me very aware of how much we do have in the West, and how much our experience has been slightly cushioned by the affluence that we have in the UK. Not everywhere, but on the whole. But it's very strange, I think, to be going through something that is genuinely a global phenomenon. The people of the book of Exodus, again, are a group of people who are genuinely going through a period of uncertainty together. I think there are 2 types of uncertainty that I want to talk about, because there's individual uncertainty or family uncertainty, and then there is also national uncertainty, or kind of a big group uncertainty, and we at the moment are in this category, although there's probably also individual uncertainty within it. So I'm going to touch a little bit on both of those categories this morning. Many of the Israelites in the book of Exodus spent their whole lives in a place of uncertainty and waiting. In fact, certainly a good chunk, almost a whole generation, end up spending their lives in the desert, living in this place of poverty, and also of a constant reliance on God. Uncertainty always tests our theology. Uncertainty tests what we believe. And for Israel, uncertainty provokes a variety of reactions within them. I went through the book of Exodus and I made a list of a few specific ways that the people of Israel respond to uncertainty. They decide to build a golden calf and to worship it, because for them, when Moses goes up the mountain to speak to God, they, in that intervening period, decide to worship a golden calf, and that doesn't go very well for them. And then when Moses comes back, they deny worshipping the golden calf and blame Aaron as the person at fault for that decision. They play the blame game in uncertainty. If you paid attention to our story in Exodus 16, you will also know that the Israelites like to grumble. Grumble is quite a common word in the book of Exodus. They are unhappy in the face of uncertainty, and they are fearful in the place of uncertainty. They attempt to plan and to store and to save as a way of guarding against uncertainty. We talked a bit about that last week, and you can see in Exodus 16 that God has promised to give them bread every day. God has promised to provide for them every day, and yet there are some that, not trusting that promise, decide to try and take more than they need for a day, and we have that lovely reference to the maggots that turn up. Most interestingly, I think, is the response that we see at the beginning of the book of Exodus 16. The Israelites, in the face of uncertainty, want and desire to go back to the familiar but terrible. They say to Moses, "Why have you brought us into the desert, into this place to starve? We want to go back to Egypt, where, yes, we were slaves and actually life was terrible, but at least we had a pot of meat." It's quite a common human reaction. It's better sometimes, it can feel, to go back, even if back is really terrible. And there's lots of pretty sad examples of times that people often do that. One of the really sad things about homelessness is that often if someone has experienced a traumatic experience of homelessness and encountered and learnt to survive as someone who is homeless, it can be very, very hard to rehabilitate people into housing. So that's commonly in the pandemic, when people were being housed in hotels, there were lots of stories about people who were used to rough sleeping, who chose to rough sleep instead of staying in the travel lodge or the hotel that was provided, which is really, really sad. But I think it does show something about the nature of human existence, that sometimes we would rather have the certainty of something terrible than the uncertainty of something that could be good or could be bad, but is innately uncertain. I think as we've responded to uncertainty in the pandemic, we can probably see some of the traits of the Israelites in ourselves as well. We perhaps have tried to find distractions, not maybe so dramatic as a golden calf, but we've maybe looked for them. We might have done some grumbling or some complaining. We might have had moments of fear, and we might have tried to regain control. As I certainly will show you, actually, one of the things that I did in the place of uncertainty. At the beginning of the pandemic, we had some friends who were having babies, and I decided I was going to make like hundreds of knitted hats, and that was which I haven't sent to them because I don't think they're very good, but I decided that my practice of uncertainty was to just make knitted hats, and that was the way I felt that I would try and regain some sense of control in my life, which was quite therapeutic but probably not very effective. In Exodus 16, though, God is shown to be a trustworthy provider in the face of uncertainty. When the Israelites complain and say, we're starving, we'd rather be in Egypt, send us back, what have you done? God provides for them. He says, I'm going to give you meat. I'm going to give you bread. He is a trustworthy provider in the face of uncertainty. But he doesn't stop the uncertainty. He invites the Israelites into a practice of holy uncertainty, and we can see that in the fact that he provides every single day. He doesn't do a big lump, you probably couldn't do that in the desert, but he doesn't provide a kind of big lump of certainty of food that will last them a month. He wants them every day to go out and practice learning what it is to rely on his provision. He wants them to embrace the path of what I and others have called holy uncertainty. What is holy uncertainty? Well, holiness, I think sometimes can get a bad or confusing rap. We can think it's things other than humanity, but holiness, the word at its core, simply means to be set apart. Anything that's set apart in the service of God. So as people who are trying to follow the way, as people who are trying to follow Jesus, we are constantly in a process of pursuing holiness. When we come to know Jesus and we commit our lives to him, we become a holy people, a royal priesthood, as it talks about in 1 Peter. We become people who have set apart our lives for God's service. And so holy uncertainty is choosing, in the face of uncertainty, to set apart that uncertainty for the ways and the purposes of God. Choosing to believe that God is at work even in the place of uncertainty. The specific thing I think that, as I've been reflecting on this holy uncertainty, that is important is the idea that you trust who you know. If in the face of uncertainty, in the face of confusion, when you know the person who is in charge, you can relax more. And I wonder, for the Israelites, that was something that they struggled with, that they didn't trust the God that had provided in the past and would provide in the future. It took them a long time to learn. The journey through the desert to Canaan, the promised land, should have taken 11 days. It started off taking them 2 years and then ended up taking them 40 years. Because they had to learn this process of trusting God in the place of uncertainty. They had to embrace that uncertainty as something that could be holy, something that could be set apart and used by God. And that's true for lots of communities. Waiting in uncertainty, I think, is an important spiritual practice that can enable a community, it can enable us as individuals as well, to be more available to the leading of the Holy Spirit. It forces us to go out every day to gather, to receive the manna, our daily bread. We have in the Lord's Prayer, again, this invitation to every day be seeking God, every day be going out. For the Israelites, it was a process that was meant to provoke transformation. And it's not a unique situation to the book of Exodus. When you look through the Bible, you see examples of holy uncertainty all over the place. The prophets pointing towards Jesus were in a place of holy uncertainty. They knew that God was going to send a Messiah, the Saviour, but they didn't know when. They prophesied. Simeon and Anna at the beginning of the Gospels, these older people waiting in the temple for this Messiah to arrive, lived a whole life of holy uncertainty. They knew that they were set apart for this purpose, but they didn't know when it was going to happen. The time perhaps between the cross and the resurrection is a time of holy uncertainty. We now know 3 days, not that long maybe for us, but at the time for the disciples, they had no idea what was going to happen. They thought all was lost. And then again, after Jesus ascends to heaven, there is this period of uncertainty for the disciples. Jesus says, wait and I will send my spirit. But they don't know when it's going to happen. Again, we know it's 40 days. But that must have been an immensely confusing time for them. Holy uncertainty has been talked about Christian thinkers as well for years, both in relation to historical times of uncertainty, but also for personal uncertainty. I'm a bit of a history nerd, and because I'm a vicar, especially a church history nerd, which is probably one of the worst types of history nerd. But in the 14th century, there was a monastic movement called the Carmelites, and they were brilliant. And there are a couple of thinkers called, one was called St. John of the Cross, and then we have Teresa of Avila, and they talk a lot about the experience of what it is to live in a place of holy uncertainty. They talk about it as the dark night of the soul. And John the Cross has written quite a famous poem about the dark night of the soul, which is a phrase that we actually use kind of outside of Christian thinking as well, so it's probably one you've heard. But he talks about this dark night of the soul as something that Christian disciples intentionally enter into. It's a particular practice of a spiritual discipline. So he seems to suggest that this place of uncertainty, this place of darkness when you can't see what is ahead of you, is actually a Christian practice. And there seems to be an expectation in Christian thinking that this is something as Christians that we will experience. We will go through periods of the dark night of the soul, of holy uncertainty. And just something I find really, really reassuring, that it's when you're in that place of confusion, it's not that you're a bad disciple, it's just that you're going through a new stage, a new experience of what it means to follow Jesus. And our invitation as we do that is to take that time to consider who it is we trust. Who is the God that we trust? To be very present in the uncertainty, to not try and skip through it using all those kind of lovely Israelite strategies from the book of Exodus, but instead to learn what it is to hold that uncertainty with us and actually see that as part of our discipleship, to see it as a practice, to ask what it is to make that uncertainty holy. Corrie ten Boom has a great quote. She was a Holocaust survivor, amazing woman. Anyway, she says, when a train goes through a tunnel and it gets dark, you don't throw away the ticket and jump off. You sit still and you trust the engineer. That's a fantastic description of what holy uncertainty looks like. When a train goes through a tunnel and it gets dark, you don't throw away the ticket and jump off. You sit still and trust the engineer. We trust who we know. When we go to uncertain places, it's important to know who our engineer is. Ultimately, this is the experience of what it means to follow Jesus. I don't know if you're someone who remembers when you first experienced or met Jesus, but if you do, you might remember a time where you chose to turn away from your life as it was and turn towards Jesus, turn towards something different. That is the practice of holy uncertainty. It's saying, I've just met this person who's amazing, who's transformational, and I'm gonna choose to turn to him and to follow him and to trust him with my life in the future, not knowing what's going to happen. Holy uncertainty is at the core of the gospel, because as people who follow Jesus, we're choosing to put our trust in him. We're choosing to follow him, even when we don't know what that will look like for the future. Holy uncertainty is to recommit all we are and all our plans and all our intentions and all our hopes and dreams to God again, and to trust that he will provide, to trust that he is trustworthy and faithful and good. The goal of this practice, we talked about Sabbath last Sunday and how that can play out. And this is, I want to suggest, the goal of holy uncertainty, what we're aiming for. And I'm not good at this, but I'll suggest it anyway, is to be able to hold our plans lightly, unafraid of the influence of uncertainty because we know who we trust. When we're working with the practice of holy uncertainty, the goal, the aim, the hope is that we get to a place where we're able to hold our plans lightly, unafraid of the influence of uncertainty because we know who we trust. And so that's my prayer for us today as we continue in this practice, voluntary or involuntary practice, that we would set it aside and allow God to work in it and allow it to shape and influence our discipleship in a way that will be liberating and freeing and remind us of the goodness of the gospel. So that's the plan. But we're going to hold that plan lightly. So it's been great to be with you today. I hope you have a good rest of your week as you practice holy uncertainty.